Well, if you think you had a bad weekend, just be thankful that you weren't a child stepping out onto the pitch of the team that you adore, thinking you're finally going to live your dream of scoring at the Cop End, only to see a retired goalkeeper not save your penalty, not once, but twice. Fair play, David James. You cannot knock the hustle. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory. I'm joined by my very good friend, Adam. Adam, how are we doing, man?
Yeah, very good. I have to feel for that 5-year-old kid or however old he was. His efforts were sublime. That's all I'm going to say. For David James to actually do that was absolutely incredible. First time, okay, fair enough. You didn't anticipate it. Second time, you were expecting him just to stand still, right? But yeah, that was the mentality. He's clearly been driven from a young age that it doesn't matter who your opponent is, you've got to defend with your life, right?
Well, that's it. You got to get that clean sheet bonus. Heaven knows you got to get that clean sheet bonus. Well, I feel like he might have been caught between when you're trying not to patronize a kid too much, and then all of a sudden you've jumped and you're like, well, I can't not save it now because it's right at me. But yeah, it doesn't. The optics aren't fantastic. But anyway, guys, beyond that, there was actual football. Adam, how was your weekend? A headlining performance from Wickham.
Yeah, great performance from a certain Richard Kono, who scores a hat-trick in 9 minutes, practically 2 minutes after coming on, scores the equaliser, then 2 minutes later, practically scores the second to put us ahead, and then gets the perfect hat-trick because it was one on left, one on right, and then the penalty, or one with the head, should I say, and one with his right foot as well. So yeah, perfect penalty, perfect hat-trick, and elevates Wickham into third place, just 3 points off second spot Wrexham, who are currently with a game in hand over us. So that's pleasing because Wickham just got to go to Burton tomorrow and hopefully we'll beat them. But yeah, hopefully no Anglo-Italian curse there. And then who knows? But I'm keeping my feet grounded, Rory. It's fair to say I still know there's a lot of the season still to play out.
Well, all I can say is if you can do the Lord's work and prevent Wrexham from getting an automatic promotion spot, there'll be a lot of new Wickham fans in the country, I'll tell you that. There'll be a lot of people wishing for that to happen. But yeah, fantastic weekend. And Kone's story is just incredible as well. Like, if you've not seen it, just his life and career getting into football has just been incredible. So just really, whenever I see a good story about him come up on the timeline, I'm like, yeah, go on, man. Like, keep doing it, bro. Like, yeah, really great story to see that. The Alex were lucky enough to come up against the mighty Salford City and Carl Robinson, who I cannot stand.
He's an absolute bellend, isn't he?
Salford played some of the worst football known to man. But our left back did turn into prime Johan Cruyff as he turned and put it across the box. Honestly, an incredible assist. If you've not seen it, search it out. Unbelievable. Again, that was the one moment in the game that was any level of quality, I think. But a big point for the Alex, and we keep within touching distance of the playoffs, so I can't complain too much. Yes, guys, I am trying to delay talking about Arsenal, but there was lots of Premier League action to talk about this week. Of course, we'll be starting in Anfield as Liverpool get a huge win in their first, what is widely being called their first test of the season. They got a 2-1 win against Chelsea. Curtis Jones getting all the headlines there. We'll be talking about him. Elsewhere, Man City left it late. John Stones again at the death to deliver all 3 points for them. Arsenal lost to Bournemouth by shooting themselves in the foot twice for fun. Ipswich lost 2-0 to Everton. Michael Keane turned into Cruyff again. If you've not seen that, unbelievable. Southampton 2-0 up, losing 3-2 to Leicester. Jamie Vardy pointing and laughing at the fans. We will be talking about that. Newcastle, horrendous season for them. 1-0 win for Brighton. That guy Welbs again getting the winner. Manchester United kept Ten Hag in a job for an extra week as they beat Brentford 2-1. Fulham and Aston Villa, 2 reds, 4 goals. And, of course, Tottenham battered West Ham in the early kickoff. So, guys, as you can tell, we've got loads to talk about. So we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we'll be going to Anfield. See you there. All right, that's the closest I can do to a Liverpool accent, and I already regret doing it. We are ready to talk about the Premier League as Liverpool 2, Chelsea 1, Curtis Jones with the winner and an all-round man of the match or player of the match performance, But this was actually a quite an entertaining game. Did you enjoy this?
Mm.
I thought it was interesting, right?
It was definitely interesting. It was, like you described, a bit of a strange one in terms of, I think many people thought it would be, or expected potentially, that Liverpool would dominate in terms of the calibre of players that they had at their disposal. Chelsea also possibly didn't live up to the expectations that they've been showing in the last few games. So this was kind of a mishmash, because actually there was periods of the game where Chelsea did quite well. They did play quite well and they took it to Liverpool, but equally maybe not as fluid in terms of the attacking third play. But also Liverpool had moments as well, potentially maybe not as solid in the middle of the park as maybe we anticipated as well. So it was definitely up for grabs, this game. I wouldn't say it was necessarily plain sailing for Liverpool, but they did enough in the game to kind of cement a win, I'd say. Possibly this is where Arne Slot has been maybe tested the best out of his opening game so far. I appreciate he did lose to Nottingham Forest, but I would say obviously different caliber of team in terms of the stylistic style of football here. So yeah, it was a fascinating watch in that respect. I think good test for Chelsea perspective as well to see what they could do. I think we both agree that Cole Palmer was largely anonymous in this game and really struggles. Maybe this is the element of where he's starting to be found out, and against better caliber of players, that they actually know how to combat his game, and potentially needs to adapt and learn how he can break through. I think we saw a little bit of signs of that in the England's internationals as well, Rory. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things, like talking points wise, that we could talk about this game. I don't know where we want to start off with, but certainly there was a lot both teams did wrong, but equally did really well, right?
Yeah, I feel like it was. You're right to say, like, I think Chelsea started the second half incredibly well, but Liverpool really managed to just like weather that storm and get through it. Especially as like, and with Chelsea scoring and Liverpool so quickly getting that winner as well, and being like, it was kind of very quick response. It showed that like they're just a very different team to when it was Klopp, right? Just a very different team. They're so much better at being able to control games and just really slow the pace down and just let, like, kind of take the energy out of the opposition and be like, no, we're at home, we're comfortable, we're just going to get this job done. And I feel like it's just really interesting seeing that shift in style and in personality, because I've not really been used to seeing Liverpool pass backwards. And like it kind of struck me when it was like they kind of, I don't know, one of the moments in the game, it came out of defence into midfield, and I was like, okay, they're going to break now. And then it was like, okay, and then back into defence and back round, and it was like, it wasn't meandering, or it was like, it was just literally control of the game, and like, you know, just making Chelsea play their style and kind of, you know, implementing what they wanted to do. So I think it's a really interesting seeing how Liverpool have adapted their style so quickly and how Slot has been able to get them to adapt so quickly. And that midfield, like, I think talking about Cole Palmer, one of the reasons why Cole Palmer was so quiet, I think he had one or two shots and one of them he kind of snatched at, and like, was because Curtis Jones did such a good job of just sticking to him. And clearly, like, Arne Slot had said, like, you just do not leave him. You do not leave him, right? And when we've got the ball, you get forward. But when Chelsea have got the ball, you stick to Cole Palmer and you do not give him any space. And I think it just really, both sides of his game, Curtis Jones were fantastic. Attacking wise, obviously won the penalty and then got the winner. Could have won another penalty, but I think the right decision was come to in the end. And then obviously on the defensive side, just kept Cole Palmer completely silent. I think Gravenberch, before the game, I was talking about, I'm not sure, like, this is going to be a big test for him as well, because he's not that natural defensive sitting midfielder breaking up play. But again, he was fantastic. He was able to help Liverpool keep control of the game. And it's not a midfield I expected to be a good starting midfield in big games for for Liverpool, if you know what I mean. I think we'd have all expected like a McAllister in there, but as a midfield that was just so functional, got the job done, really impressive. And I think Onslaught has just found them, just really got that style across them. So absolutely fantastic for them. But for Chelsea, I think it shows that they're close. They are close. Yeah. Like, they're going to have a very good season, I think. They're going to be fun to watch. They're going to get into Europe. Like, I think they'll do all... you can see the distance in project, right? Chelsea, like, they're still figuring out what the hell the first 11 is. They're still like, you know, Lavia, this was his first start in a very long time. Very good player, but he's not really been playing much recently. Like, they're still figuring out what their best 11 is. But the 11 they have there beyond Sanchez is a very strong team, and I think they are further ahead in their project than we expected them to be, I think. But let's kind of go through the game chronologically, I suppose. The first one was a penalty. Obviously, Mohamed Salah kind of dived, didn't get booked, and it was originally given as a penalty, but then no, that one was just ignored, wasn't it? And then there was the penalty here. Now, this one was a clear penalty, right? I don't think there was any discussion with this one, any debate.
I think the referee got it spot on. I think, it was Levi Colwell who swipes him. Essentially, he swipes him. He doesn't get anything on the ball, so definitely a penalty. So yeah, well respected in terms of that decision, for sure.
And then, of course, Salah puts it away nice and calmly. He continues his very good start to the season. And then there's the second penalty kind of incident, I suppose.
Yes.
On first impressions, did you see it as a penalty? I think ultimately they got the right decision, right? Sanchez definitely gets a touch on the ball. It just looks a bit messy, right?
Yeah, I think Curtis Jones kind of delays his reaction. So he knows Sanchez is coming at him, right? But he makes it almost feel like he had to get a touch to then kind of make it feel like a penalty decision. But it wasn't a penalty decision because, if anything, he kind of just clatters into him. Essentially the same that you would say for 50-50. So actually, he didn't necessarily, not get the ball in that equation. So I think the right decision was made in that equation. And yeah, definitely, if anything, the blame is firmly at Curtis Jones for maybe dilly-dallying on the ball and maybe not being decisive in that very moment. He should have just gone for it, if anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. He did. You could see him pulling up rather than actually just going through for the ball. But yeah, ultimately VAR did get the decision right. And then Nicholas Jackson, with his 5 goals and 3 assists already this season, he doesn't look particularly aesthetically pleasing. He doesn't look like he kind of... I find him very confusing, but he does get goals. It was a well-taken goal. He was a constant threat. Like, he did keep the centre-backs busy. Like, he is a very effective striker, right? He just doesn't... I still can't figure out what his strengths are. I know what his weaknesses are, but I can't really... But he does get goals.
All I would say is I've been very critical of him in terms of his decision-making this season in particular. I felt like he still needs time to develop his game. I felt this was more of a mature performance from him. And I think the element in terms of maybe being more effective for this game laid with Maresca and the tactics he deployed personally. I think had Jackson had another player to feed off up top, potentially he's able to maybe stretch those defenders a bit more. Because I think he did up until that moment where he does score the goal. I think he does superbly leading the line. I think he just needs a bit more support up top. And I don't think necessarily he's suited all the time in every game scenario to be the solitary sort of attacker. So I think he definitely needs someone to feed off at times. Whether that be a number 10 that sits behind him or whether that be, say, someone that's up front alongside him. I think, had he, for example, Rory had a Drogba-esque player next to him, I think you could see definitely a good partnership being shared there. So yeah, I think Jackson did look really good in this game, but I know what you mean by the fact that there's still an element of unknown with him, right? We know there's a player to be unearthed there, but we don't quite know yet if he's mature enough, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he feels like he's still like a super rough diamond, like he just needs to be polished a little bit and a little bit just tidier. But you can't argue with the numbers, and he is like, he deserves to be their starting striker every week. I think it's an interesting point with like who's there to support him, because I think this was a disappointing game from Jadon Sancho. He arguably possibly could have had a penalty in the first half, but didn't really get into the game as much, wasn't really able to beat his man or implement like imprint himself on the game. Madueke I thought was decent, but again not really in the game enough. And I think those are the players that are meant to be getting around Jackson, getting those balls into him. So I think, he was a bit isolated at times. As we said, with Cole Palmer having a quiet day, he did cut a bit of an isolated figure at times. But I do want, Chelsea were very impressive, and I'm so surprised by how good a job Maresca is doing, genuinely, because I was confused as to why they got him from Leicester. It felt like chaos and just he's just won the championship, so let's get him. There was no real thought behind it. Leicester fans weren't particularly happy with Maresca because, you know, the football was great, but they nearly threw away the title. Like, so it kind of felt like, okay, where's this going? Obviously, the chaos that is Chelsea, but it feels like he's got the force of personality to really get these players behind him. And, like, he is using this squad really well. Like, even so, Sancho's not playing well. Okay, well, I'll just bring on Pedro Neto. And you're like, fuck, right, okay, damn. Like, that's some real strength in depth, right? And then when they go 2-1 down, so it's just after the goal, isn't it? And he wanted, I think he wanted to bring him on before, but just as they go 2-1 down, now Badiashile I thought was terrible when he came on, but Enzo and Vega both played really well when they came on. That's more strength. And then Nkunku thrown on again. And you're like, there is some, that is a quality squad, but I'm really impressed with how well he's managed to get them together, because I thought it would just, the job would eat him up and he'd be gone by January and, like, you know, it would be moving on to the next one. But it feels like he's really bought into the ethos of what the club is now. And, you know, like, this is how it's going to work. You just have to deal with it. And he has just gone, okay, well, I'm just going to concentrate on getting results. That's my job. The rest of that noise, the rest of what's going on above me is none of my business. I just have to make sure that I'm doing the best job I can to get a team on the pitch that wins games. And I think for now, if he continues in this way, and if Chelsea continue this way, he could be genuinely a very good manager, and he could be like a really unexpected star for that for the club, I suppose. Also, it's really good to see Reece James starting. He got 70 minutes, right? I think there's a lot of 53 minutes. There's a lot of jokes about him, but genuinely, like, that boy needs some fitness, and it was just nice to see him back on the pitch. Club captain, remember? But, like, really good to see him on the pitch. Thought he did pretty well, and you could see, like, you know, there was a few flashes of the player that he is. But when you talk about Liverpool and what the kind of context to this win, I suppose, because obviously we know that the fixtures are tougher from here, you know, heading to the Emirates next. I can't wait. But they're definitely title contenders, right? We know that now. These are like, only Pep Guardiola got to 10 wins quicker in Premier League history as a manager than Arne Slot. Best defense in the league. Everything's looking pretty good. Like, they, at the moment, as an Arsenal fan, I'm saying they're the team that are going to push City the closest.
Yeah, it does feel like it at the moment. And I think that's it, as you allude to at the very beginning, it's all down to the way that he's able to get these group of players and get a different kind of style of football going, right? He's implemented that very quickly. And I know people are very easy to kind of say the foundations were already there. But it's another thing to kind of diversify the style of football when they've been kind of ingrained in terms of the way they were going about their kind of game. Don't forget, they were all about being gung-ho, very fast, very fluid in terms of how to get the attacks and be as quick as you can at the other end of the pitch. Whereas now it's a lot more kind of take your time, controlled, measures. Let's take our time in games, and you will get those opportunities. You know, it's almost like, here's a ball, now kind of drag it out of the opponents, try and open up those spaces. And they are learning to adapt with that. So that's a lot of credit to Arne Slot. In terms of that kind of piece now going forward, though, obviously they've had a few injuries. So this is where they're going to be tested. But a lot of credit to Arne Slot for keeping the momentum, because it would have been quite easy, you know, in Alisson Becker, for example, for levels to drop, for example, especially from a defensive point of view. But also just generally across the pitch, they seem like they've got a good understanding with the players, right? And even those players that do come in from a substitute point of view or rotational point of view, they seem to impact the game in such a way. I would say Alexis McAllister yesterday looked like he was on the mission just to hack down players as opposed to play. But with that in mind, they played really well. So, a lot of credit. It's going to be interesting. I feel this is the period where Arne Slot really gets tested, though. And this game on next week with yourselves, Arsenal, should be an interesting encounter, that's for sure.
It's annoying me that Liverpool keep hiring really affable, likeable managers. In his post-match, he just came across as such a nice bloke again and was like, I got booked, I deserved it. And he's like super open and like, He just seems like such a nice guy and obviously very, very good at his job. So I think Liverpool fans must be absolutely delighted with how that's going. I love the beef between Nunes and Badiashile when Badiashile came on. It was just a lovely bit of pantomime shithousery going on there. That was good fun. But hopefully the Jota injury isn't too bad. If he misses the Emirates game, I'm not going to complain because he scores against us every single time. But I hope he's back the second the final whistle has gone at the Emirates, because he's a really important player for them in an attacking sense as well. He's having a really good season. It looked like it was his groin, right? I think he was grabbing his groin as he came off. Not like that, but it seemed like, he was... hopefully that's not a bad injury. Big win for Liverpool there that keeps them top of the league, 1 point ahead of Man City, and it's all this weekend. It's all gone wrong, Adam. It all went so bloody wrong. Yeah. But fantastic win for Liverpool. Well done. Enjoy your pathetic little win. And let's go on to the next game at the top of the table as we talk about Wolves 1, Man City 2. And now I can't remember what I said last week, whether I said I agree with you that Wolves are going down, but I would like to retract that statement despite this loss and say Wolves are definitely 100% going to stay up. I thought they were so good in this game. But anyway, Man City got the win. Gvardiol scoring one of his now what feels fairly regular 25-yard screamers into the top corner. Yeah. But the talking point was, of course, and there's a wider point here with referees, but was all about the refereeing decision in the 95th minute as Stones gets the header. But it's all about the VAR, right? Now, the way I saw this, Bernardo Silva definitely gets in the way of Jose Sarr, but then he's out of the way by the time the header comes in. So he's not interfering with the goalkeeper. I think it's the right decision, right? I think ultimately the refereeing team came to the right decision. Good process, boys. Moving on. Yeah. My issue is that the first corner, before that first corner, there's a Man City foul on a Wolves player at the other end, and it's completely not punished, not picked up on. City go down the other end. They break. They get the corner, and then they get the other corner, then they score. Now, I know I'm sat in an Arsenal fan, an Arsenal shirt, and every City fan will be there going, "Oh, you're just bitter, stop crying." But I genuinely think, and it kind of sums up the issue of the media talking about referees, is that they didn't actually look at where the problem was. Because the decision they've now spent days talking about isn't the wrong decision. The wrong decision was a minute before that, and it was blatant. Basically, my issue is with why every post-match conversation now, and we're going to talk about the game because I want to talk about the game because now we're doing it as well, but every post-match conversation now is just about referees and about refereeing decisions. Sky Sports fucking love it. They cannot get past just every game becoming a discussion of referees and making referees the star of the game and making the referees the biggest headliners in the league, getting talked more about than Haaland and Saka and Buddy Kulusevski and whoever. We're talking about refs every single week. No wonder Howard Webb's got a massive fucking ego. Like, are you sick of this yet? Because I think there's no tactical analysis anymore. There's no game analysis. It's just referees every single time. And now we're doing it.
Yeah, it does get a bit tiresome, to be honest. I think it has been helped from a Sky perspective, and obviously the likes of Gary Neville, they brought on Howard Webb to their overlap program, didn't they? All pally, weren't they?
Well, I'm not watching that one. I refuse to fucking watch it. I refuse to watch it, honestly.
I didn't even watch it myself. I only watched a few clips, but it seems a very pally, let's put it this way, and it's getting to a point where it's very cringe. But to your point, I think that there has been some lost analysis, but it's not helped by, I suppose, look, it's the interpretations either by the VAR or / by the referee, right? You're right to kind of say, look, in terms of the actual decision for the goal, I think it was the right one. I agree with you in terms of the push, though, from, I think it was one of the midfielders against Cunha or something like that. Something like that. In that instant, but the problem what you've got, Rory, is there was 3 corners before the actual goal was scored. So you're right to root. It went to the other end. Unfortunately, because of the way that the game had gone on at that point, because there was 2 consecutive corners from Grealish before it goes to the other side from Foden, and then obviously that's the inevitable winner for Man City. But I do feel a little bit for Gary O'Neill because he did articulate the point of there was very similar circumstances last season where they were affected, and the interpretation was because despite the fact that the Wolves player had allowed some gap of air to allow the goal to take place, it was still obstruction, whereas this one wasn't seen as obstruction. So I do feel for him because, again, it's the levels of interpretation, and we want that to be consistent. And I'm getting bored of saying the same things again and again and again every week. So let's kind of focus on the game and talk about, yes, Wolves did play better, Rory. They did play well. For the majority of the match, they were on the back foot. But what I was really, I suppose, surprised at was how Wolves restricted Man City to long distance shots. It wasn't intricate kind of moves from Man City. They really did struggle to break down this Wolves side. I was really impressed by Semedo. I thought as a right back, I've not been his biggest fan, but this season, alongside Nouri, they seem to be the outlets for Wolves. And I know defensively they're still trying to get their shit together, proverbially, not helped by the fixture lists, I'm sure, but they're doing as best as they can. This was probably the most solid performance. You could see there was togetherness within the kind of stadium itself. I felt like, if we think about the offset of the previous game week, they struggled against Brentford. The crowds got on their backs because of the way that they performed at Brentford in that particular game. It would have been easy for Wolves to capitulate, especially as soon as they got pegged back in this match. But they gave it their all. They had some willing direct runners, as I say, not just from Semedo and Nouri. Gomez in the middle of the park. Cunha was really good. Strand Larsen as well. And I know there's a lot of criticism aimed at Strand Larsen that he didn't do much in the match, but what could he have done? He was trying to get on the end of things. He was a willing runner. So for me, I thought that was a really strong performance. I still have Wolves to go down, however, Rory, because I still think this is the element that whilst they've had a really bad fixture list, they need to start picking wins. And I appreciate there are 3 other sides that still haven't recorded a win, which works in their favour. So they've still got time to turn around. The problem is, after these round of fixtures, if they don't pick up points, that's where you kind of go, where there's a line cross. Yeah. Look, I've got nothing but good words for Gary O'Neill. Unfortunately, the run that he has been on since April, and this is what we're talking about, last season to this season, hasn't been positive. And they've changed players. Yes, they've changed personnel as well. But they need to do better. They need to grind out some form of results. But that's not a reflection of this game. All I would say on Man City, I will drum this drum as much as I can. But Grealish needs to be in the 11. He needs to be there because you can see what an impact he does when he's running, when he's dictating. I think he's the perfect replacement for the eventual De Bruyne departure. I think he needs to be given that role. But yeah, that's where I'm going to stand. I'm going to finish at that point.
No, I think he kind of felt like he got lost a little bit last season, right? And after the treble party, it took him a full year to recover. But I think this year, he genuinely looked hungry again. He looks switched on. He looks like he's up for it. I think he's really unlucky to not be starting games. You're absolutely right. I think Doku as a concept is kind of better coming off the bench and just being that guy when your wing back's knackered, just throw him on and he's just he's the last thing you want to come up against in the last 10 minutes, right? As long as you're under 30, you'll be fine. I don't know if you've seen it. It's one of my favourite narratives on Twitter is whenever Doku gets a goal or assist, how old was the wing back? I absolutely love it. But Semedo is 30, by the way. But yeah, I think Grealish should be starting at this point. But we do also have to say I don't want to sound too bitter, so I'm overcompensating. But City, obviously they're missing Rodri, right? Because in the transitions, they concede the goal first. They're conceding a lot of goals first as well, and then having to get themselves back into games. They're vulnerable on the transition. But we have to say, without Rodri, they're still unbeaten. They're still winning all the games. They're still getting it done.
Annoyingly.
And this is, Man City not looking like Man City kind of, and you're like, okay, no, yeah, they're still very, very impressive. And, Savinho looks great and Rico Lewis is class. And Kovacic looks like he's reborn. And you're like, okay, no, they're a really good team again. Gundogan coming back has annoyed me so much because he's such a good footballer. When he went to Barcelona, I was like, oh, whew, okay, right, don't have to worry about him again. And then you watch him and you're like, the fact they got him back was just such good business. I bet it must have been 0.2 second between Guardiola hearing he was unhappy and him being on the phone to him being like, come back here, because he is just so key to them and such a great player. I really enjoy watching him. So yeah, for Man City, not a great performance, but they got the win.
Yeah, sure.
But Wolves, I think that midfield, like, you're right to highlight Aït-Nouri, you're right to highlight Semedo on his day is very good. I think he's a bit too inconsistent, but in this game he was good.
Yeah.
That midfield of Gomez, Andre, and Lamina, I really like. And the strike force of Cunha and Larson, I think there's enough quality there. But like you said, they've got to get a win within the next 2 games. Otherwise, they really are starting to look in trouble because their fixtures do get a little bit easier now. Yeah, interesting for Wolves. His name, Gary O'Neill's name, was sung by the fans. They were kind of supporting him. There was a bit of a kind of slight tidal change in support, but now the Premier League have asked him for his evidence to support his statements on his, subconscious bias, which I think, if you want to get into a philosophical debate, everybody has subconscious bias.
Yeah, of course
it exists. He's making a valid point. I just think that the Premier League, the second you make any slight type of criticism, it's like fucking 1984. You get sent to room 101 and you get banned for fucking 3 weeks.
Do you know what? He should just go Shakespearean, just do like monets and poets and stuff like that, explaining his rationale, right? Just to confuse the hell out of the Premier League, right? That would be beautiful.
I've got time for it. Just get on the phone to Eric Cantona. I'll see what he can see what he can come up with.
Whip some seagulls.
He can build a defence for you. You'll be fine. But obviously that will be a fine and like a 3-match ban or something for daring to criticise the Premier League. How dare you? But let's move on to the next game, and let's go to Southampton 2, Leicester 3 now. What's the opposite of a strong... Well, just the mentality. My God.
Yeah.
You're up within 28 minutes, 2-0 up at home to a team who you were playing last season in the Championship. This is at home. You're looking at getting 3 points. And then within half an hour, you collapse and you leave again with nothing. Obviously, the red card didn't help, right? Let's kind of say that as well. But the mentality of this team and Russell Martin coming out after the game and being like, one person made a mistake. That's why we conceded the goal. Now, obviously, he didn't name him in public, but how do you think that's going to go down? It didn't feel like his support was particularly strong already. Like, this really is a proper dent, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario, isn't it? I did kind of try and kind of get an idea of how Southampton fans are feeling about Russell Martin, but also that performance. It's very interesting to see there's a split kind of core between the two sides of Southampton. There's a core element that believes we should stick with Russell Martin because he got us up into this position. Yes, he's got to learn to adapt in that respect. He needs to be less strict in terms of his philosophy. He needs to be a bit more fluid, a bit more pragmatic potentially. And obviously it didn't help with him calling out a player as well. We can guess as to who the player in question was, but there's also an element of the Southampton fan base that isn't really happy with his approach so far. It's not going to keep him up in the Premier League at this rate currently. And this was a game that typified, I suppose, Russell Martin in terms of the approach in the Premier League. Look, they looked lively for the first 5 minutes, then they were a bit placid, but they managed to get 2 goals. And then they kind of look like they've done enough to kind of keep it at that scoreline. Second half, just not there to be seen. Now, there has to be a level of blame at Russell Martin, but there's also a level of blame that has to be aimed at the players as well. And I feel there's the answer is somewhere in between, right, Rory? I don't think they did very good business in the summer transfer window, personally. I don't think they had a good enough depth and quality of depth in that team. You know, I didn't feel confident with that midfield that they were going to ruffle a few feathers in the Premier League. You need players if you're not going to have necessarily staples that can maybe add a bit of quality in terms of the ball and, you know, playing style, then you need someone that's going to make it difficult for your opponents. I don't feel with Southampton, they make it difficult for their opponents. And this is why they're being kind of really broken up really easily. You saw in particular by Leicester when they brought on Abdul Fatawi, what a performance that was. But he was a substitute that came on and every time just down that right-hand side. He came in on the middle at times, stayed on the wings as well. Just a constant menace. He was just pegging back the fullback. They didn't know how to cope with him, and his directness really opened up Southampton. Now, if you're looking at like holistically, you have to kind of look at kind of the players in front of that defensive line and go, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing to help your fullback in that position? And at no occasion when you saw it, even on match of the day, did I ever see any of the Southampton players back him up, try and make it difficult, and they just really struggled. So yeah, I think there's a element of blame at the players, but yeah, Russell Martin's maybe not as pragmatic in terms of his approach. He is quite stubborn. He wants to play a certain style of football. That is unlikely to change, Rory. I think this is going to be very similar or akin to Vincent Kompany last season, where he sticks to a philosophy of style of football, which either will get him a job at the end of it. So maybe at Barcelona by the end of this season, we don't know. But on the flip
that's
side,
what he's doing. I work for Vincent.
Possibly.
He's in Bayern now. I could
possibly. Or yeah, it could really end up badly for him. But ultimately, I suppose, what do Southampton expect? Because, like I say, they didn't really spend too much in the summer. They didn't bring in like quality players, I would argue, and this is the results. So yeah, there's a bit of both. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think because they've still like spent a fair bit of money on like Aaron Ramsdale, and they've like brought in a player where you're like, okay, this should be raising the floor of the team, or like raising the levels a little bit, but you can spend whatever you want on players, but if your manager is not gonna, if your manager's not gonna like compromise a little bit and like be a little bit pragmatic when you're trying to like battle for survival, like I think he's almost setting up his players to fail at this point, and like it's what we said about Kompany last year. Like you're liable for this now because the players go out and do what you tell them to do because you're the manager, right? And at this point, it feels like you're setting them up to look like idiots. Like and eventually the players will just lose faith and be like, "Look, I'm sick of getting stick for you." When we could just be a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more sensible, and we could start picking up the odd point, get the odd draw, and not like solidifying a game where you're 2-0 up and be sensible. I feel like Russell Martin should be getting absolutely battered for this performance because to just continue with that style when you're 2-0 up and you still haven't got a bloody win. Like, you've just got to fight and grab onto everything you can in this league. And I feel like it's a failure of duty at this point, honestly. But yes, the players also aren't doing their doggies and they're not backing each other up and they're not like, I mean, but I think the blame lies at Russell Martin's door at this point, I think. But for Leicester fans will be screaming that we're not giving them like an incredible comeback. 98th-minute goal. Jamie Vardy standing and pointing and laughing at the Southampton fans. It will be a very sad day when that man retires. But I wanted to talk about, you've mentioned Fatawa, I wanted to talk about Buonanotte. Now, obviously, he's on loan from Brighton.
Yeah.
But, because of course he is. But he got the goal today. He was fantastic against Arsenal as well. He's a player that I really, really enjoy watching. I think he's someone that could really be worth keeping an eye on. But what I'm finding fascinating about Leicester is that, like, they are now on 9 points. They've got 2 wins, 3 draws. They're up in 14th place. They're like 6 points ahead of Crystal Palace, who were the third bottom. They played really well against Arsenal. Like, they could have got a draw against Arsenal quite easily, right? Like, they've won 2 in a row, but nobody seems happy. The fans still hate Steve Cooper. It's this really interesting thing of like, at some point, if this continues, the fans are going to have to be like, oh no, okay, this is all right, I suppose. And like, they've scored 12 goals in 8 games. That's not bad. Like, it's not like it's boring to watch. It's not. Why do you think it is they're not happy? Is it just the style? Is it because he's ex-Forest? Is it all of those things?
Yeah, I got wind of this earlier in the season, and it's to do with the aesthetics of the football. It's because Steve Cooper, probably knowing from his days with Nottingham Forest that you can try and outplay teams, but it's not necessarily going to win you results. And I think he's gone very pragmatic. Steve Cooper has got that within his arsenal where he can change it within games. He can make decisions that will make it a bit more fluid. But I think he's being sensible. I think, look, given the circumstances at Leicester, look, there seems to be a lot of rumours rife about their financial position. So this is why they've had to get in loans like Bonete in through the door. And the fact that they've got Jamie Vardy up top kind of tells you the scenario that he's got to work with, right? So I think he's trying to do with what he's got to make the most of this. They're doing really well, as you allude to. They're getting results, but maybe not aesthetically. And this was the whole same kind of premise with Enzo Maresca, that they were playing aesthetically well, but not getting results, right? So it don't seem to be a happy fan base either way. You can go one way and it doesn't please a bunch of Leicester City fans, or you can go the other and it doesn't seem to please them. So I think there has to be some realism in terms of the approach here. But look, I feel with Steve Cooper at the helm, they seem in a better position at the moment than probably they thought they would be right now. And yeah, I think if they can get into January transfer window and seek some further additions that would get them over the line in terms of just survival right now, they'll take that. They would take that personally. So I think he's doing a superb job, and this was a massive result. But before we kind of give it all credit, unfortunately, we will have to allude to another refereeing decision. That was Anthony Taylor missing this kind of incident. And I don't know also your point in terms of VAR, but apparently the reason for not giving a penalty to Southampton prior to the goal that Leicester City scored was because of the tug on the back of the Southampton player wasn't substantiated, i.e. he hadn't gone down, which I think is farcical because it's holding down to him for at least 5 to 6 seconds. It was counted before he gets to that area where he could make contact with the ball. But it's ridiculous, right?
This is the same thing we talked about with the bloody pull in the Palace game with Van Dijk, and it was a fleeting pull. Oh, it was a fleetingly quick pull. It was just fucking this. I can't. It just winds me up too much. Yeah, I have no idea. Nobody knows what the rule is on anything. Every decision that's made, they basically just make up a justification on the spot and go, well, that's why we got that one right. And you're like, okay, right. And that's why we got that one right. So shut up and stop questioning us. They just come up with a justification on the spot. I've got zero interest in listening to them. When I was watching the Arsenal game, when the Arsenal fans were like, I really want to hear what the referee said there in that prize, I don't want to hear a single fucking word from any of them. I've got no interest because I know it's going to be bullshit no matter what they come out with. Yeah, a mad decision. Just a mad decision. And just nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. And it's very, 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 very frustrating. But huge win for Leicester. Slightly concerning they found themselves 2-0 down in the first place. But if you're going to do it, at least, come back in the 98th minute with a winner. Why not? The fans absolutely love it. The limbs in that away end as well. Oh, my God. It looked absolutely incredible. But, guys, looking at the timer, I've managed to do 42 minutes and 44 seconds without talking about Arsenal. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's move on to Bournemouth 2, Arsenal 0. Or I would say Arsenal 2, Arsenal 0, as we managed to shoot ourselves in the foot yet again and put ourselves down to 10 men. Not only that, we gifted them 2 goals. Adam, how did you see this performance? Talk about Bournemouth before I moan about Arsenal. Bournemouth were fantastic, right?
Bournemouth really deserve a lot of credit before we talk about the noise. Because they do this fantastic thing of being able to really suss out their opponents, right? Areola is doing a fantastic job of just making it very difficult. And I think and this is a point that was made on another podcast, had there been even 11 against 11, I think Arsenal are still in for a really tough game. And that is the key here, because although we will allude to the fact that obviously Arsenal were missing key men like Saka, like obviously Odegaard in this particular match, they made it really tough. And I think that corner routine in particular by Brian Christie for the goal was absolutely delightful, because Arsenal are good at doing those kind of things to opponents, but when it happens on the other foot, it's not as pleasant, is it? But the way they did it was exquisite, absolutely beautiful technique, and they clearly thought about doing this against Arsenal. They must have seen that their concentration will be in the box as opposed to outside of the box, and those little touches were just enough to give the foil to Christie to slam it back home. So a lot of credit for the way they did it. Ivan Nilsson up top. I've always rated him at Porto. Great runner. And he looks like he's getting better and better with every game. And yeah, every ounce of quality there. I think 40 million seems a shrewd bit of business there as well, Rory. It's fair to say. But yeah, question marks in terms of Arsenal, in terms of, let's forget about the noise for a second. I just want to talk about individuals. Martinelli here, for example, should make the most of that Kepa mistake. Bit sore there. Jakub Kiwior, I want to highlight here. He looks completely devoid of any confidence right now, not helped by the way he gives that second goal, essentially, to Bournemouth. I think he needs to be some time out of this first team squad, personally. But I also would like to allude to the fact that Mikel Arteta, I was a bit baffled with some of the choices that he brought on. Why wasn't Wanyeri given a chance, for example? Why didn't he give some of the other players a shot? Get your thoughts on that first.
Well, firstly, I want to say Bournemouth were fantastic. They forced us into so many mistakes, like they're pressing high up. Just the reason why we conceded those 2 goals is because they forced us into mistakes, right? And that's like their doing, as well as ours. I think Arteta has... There's a weird thing in the Arsenal fan base at the moment that there's a group of people who can't criticise Arteta at all, and then there's the absolute nutters who want him gone, right? I think there is like a in the middle where you can still criticise a manager and be like, I think you got it wrong here. He's been too cautious this season. I think he's too terrified of losing. I think the last 2 seasons have really scarred him in terms of we can't drop any points, so we cannot lose. And his first instinct is we cannot lose. So when we go down to 10 men, I'm going to try and do this quickly, but when we go down to 10 men against Man City, of course, you just fucking batten down the hatches. Sure. Let's just get out of this alive, right? When it's Bournemouth, no disrespect to Bournemouth, but I think he reacted far too quickly with that substitution. So he takes Sterling off in the 37th minute. What I think he should have done, drop Declan Rice into centre-back, just have him there for the rest of the game, like the rest of the half at least. So you've still got Sterling and Trossard and Havertz. You've got that midfield 2 of Partey and Marino, who are both defensive-minded anyway. And you can still have a bit of threat up front out on the break. But instead, he takes Sterling off. We've got 0 threat up front. And then you're playing the same way you did against City, against Bournemouth, when I just don't think it's necessary. So I think he's being too cautious when we go down to 10 men. And to be honest, he needs to figure that out because we're going out to 10 men every fucking week at this point. So we need to figure out what the plan is when we go down to 10 men. But with the team selection, I think there was a bit of like hindsight is 2020 with this, because nobody that I knew before the game was looking at that midfield of Marino, Rice and Partey and complaining. Everyone was like, okay, that's solid. Marino gets a start. It'll be interesting to see if Rice, like, what roles him and Rice fulfill. But then as the game went on, you were like, yeah, there's 0 creativity here. There's no one like, not only are we missing Ødegaard, who is the creative spark of this team, and Saka, but now there's no one who can even get that creativity, get that pass, get that spark in midfield. I think with 11, we draw this game. Like, and I think we probably it's a horrible draw to watch. I within the first 20 minutes, I was like, we're not winning this game. Like I pride myself on the fact that I can usually tell within 10 seconds if Arsenal are going to win a game or not, and I knew we weren't going to win this one. But I think Arteta needs to not be so cautious. We're just really, really cautious at the moment. The football isn't really that fun to watch. It's super pragmatic, which is what his strength. He wants to be the team that can win in any situation, right? And we've done it pretty well so far. Like, all of this in the context of this is our first away loss in 2024. It's our first loss of the season, like in all competitions. Like, you've got to put it in context. It's just that up against Man City and this Liverpool team, every drop point feels like a disaster, right? And now the game on Sunday next weekend is absolutely huge. But I just think, in general, Arteta needs to be less cautious and just a bit more willing to attack a bit, because we could have got something out of this with 10 men. Martinelli doesn't telegraph that shot, and we get, like, that's right before Bournemouth score, right? Like, I think we score that and we probably win the game. Like, it's just, he's playing with the handbrake on, as Wenger would have said, and it's a little bit frustrating. The red card was a red card. I'm not arguing about that. I did have an issue at the time with the fact that the Bournemouth player wasn't in control of the ball. The ball was going nowhere near him. I thought maybe, but what annoyed me was, why did VAR get involved? because I thought VAR was going to get less involved this year. There was nothing that the referee saw on the screen that he wouldn't have seen on the pitch. I just don't think VAR needed to get involved. But again, this is going back into my thing of why the fuck are they making referees the main character? What's the first thing that happens? They go to Howard Webb and he's sat on the phone highlighting him in the stand. Why the fuck do we need to see Howard Webb? Why?
No one needs to see that.
What is the reason for that?
You're just
so he can
look
like the mafia boss who's conducting his business and conducting the fucking league, like
with his Rotherham United hat, right?
Yeah, so. they like. It was another moment for me where I was like, the Premier League are really like. I'm expecting the promos of the game soon to have like a player from each team, and then the ref stood in the middle as like the promo. Honestly, give it 2 years, you'll have that because they're making the main characters of every fucking game, and I've no idea why. But it was so needless to see Howard Webb there, just looking like a fucking shit mafia boss. But yeah, it was a red card. It just annoyed me that Tosin didn't get sent off for Chelsea the next day because why have any level of consistency?
It seems identical.
But yeah, Arsenal just need to pick themselves up quickly, win against Shakhtar, hopefully, and a big game at the weekend. Still encourage trying not to catastrophize too much, as I avoided Twitter for the weekend because Arsenal Twitter have done exactly that. And in one of my tweets, I did say I understand why rival fans fucking despise us. I completely get it. We're the loudest moaning reactionary bunch of twats on Twitter. It's infuriating. But we're going to leave that there. I've done with my rant. We've only got about 10 minutes left. Sorry, guys. And we're going to go elsewhere super quickly through the results. Let's start with the first kickoff. Tottenham 4, West Ham 1. Tottenham take Maddison off, and all of a sudden they're good. But my agenda aside, this was an outstanding performance from Spurs, but equally shocking from West Ham, right?
Yeah, mixed bag from a West Ham perspective. They started off quite well, dare to frustrate Spurs, it's fair to say. You know, Maddison wasn't able to get into a flow. But that said, Maddison's run does create the equaliser for Dejan Kulusevski, so it's not all aimed at Maddison. However, what I would say is when Sarr does come on, he applies the intensity that Ange wants to achieve here. So obviously he will be highlighted and there'll be a question mark of where does he fit going forward? Is he a squad player, or is there potentially an argument to say Maddison doesn't fit the Spurs Ange Postecoglou style of football? It's hard to say. All I would say is I spoke to a Spurs supporting parent over the weekend when my little boy was playing football. He saw it and he said it's just Ange ball, basically. You can get games where players look absolutely immense, and then against other opponents they get sussed out and it looks like they're terrible and it needs a whole new clearance and new players through the door. So this is unfortunately, I think, going to be the ongoing saga with Spurs. On West Ham, very placid in the middle of the pitch, especially for that second half. And kudos, what a hot and cold performance that was. If you could be more Jekyll and Hyde than that and make it obvious that you don't want to be at West Ham, it's fair to say. That was very obvious, right?
So I did go to watch the Arsenal game with the Milan Arsenal supporters group. Shout out the Milan Arsenal supporters group. And we did see some West Ham fans afterwards. And I was like, what the hell was that Kudus thing? And they were just like, I still can't explain it. He just completely lost his nut. Decided to boot. Who was it? He kicked Benton. Not
basically
through. It was booted someone twice.
Van der Ven was on the floor. He was already pushed over by Kudus, right? So that was the first incident. Then decides to square up to him. Then Richarlison does his typical antics of like, I've got hit, but he wasn't hit. Okay, and then he pushes Pape Sarr in the face, like literally pushing his arms out. So inevitably he was going to be sent off. But this is the Kudus side that probably will put a lot of clubs off him. And this is the reason why he doesn't get those big money moves. So he's not doing himself any favours when he's doing that.
I'll still take him at Arsenal. Let's move on.
You'd suit at Arsenal, right? With the Red Cord record.
Yeah, join the club. Join the club. Arteta will never get angry with you. Next up, we have Fulham 1, Aston Villa 3. Jimenez scoring again. Incredible form from him. But Aston Villa managed to turn it round. Pereira misses a penalty, 2 red cards. Villa continue a pretty decent start to the season. Manchester United 2-1 win as Ten Hag saves his job for another week. Fantastic assist from Fernandes here. Lovely back heel assist. Højlund getting the goal there. really interesting that they managed to turn it around in the second half, because the second Brentford scored like the last kick of the first
They
half.
went
Thought,
apeshit.
uh-oh, where's this going? But Ten Hag did manage to turn it around. Garnacho and Højlund getting the goals there.
Yep.
And elsewhere, let's talk about Newcastle Brighton, Welbeck with a goal in the 35th minute. Looked like he injured himself, but he's since been on social media to say, don't worry, I'm fine. I'll be back for the next game. But we need to talk about Newcastle United, Adam. They have been in terrible form in the Premier League now. That makes it 4 games without a win in the Premier League. I'm just double checking. So they lost to... Oh, God, I need to go further back.
They've lost for a while. I think, Rory, it coincides with Alexander Isak being off injured at the same time, it's fair to say as well. And he did come back for this game. But yeah, possibly he still needs to work on his match sharpness before he's back at the levels that we know he can display. But yeah, I think this is a question mark around the depth that is there for Newcastle, because when players like his caliber, they haven't got Callum Wilson available either, but he's always permanently injured, unfortunately. So yeah, inevitably they do find it hard, I feel, at Newcastle. And yeah, credit to Brighton as well. Great result for them on the road as well. What more can I say? I think, yeah, Welbeck showing us what is possible, right? But yeah, I think the other concern from this, and I haven't made notes of this, but it's rumoured, is that Anthony Gordon and Eddie Howe clashed in the changing room. Rumours that Anthony Gordon isn't happy with the way that they approached it, especially as he was one of the few bright sparks for Newcastle and he was substituted. So I think that might be a concern for Newcastle United. So we'll wait and see. Probably by January might force a move elsewhere, maybe back to Liverpool. I'm just speculating.
It would be absolutely classic. Yeah, I was just saying their last win was on the 15th of September against Wolves. Really not going well. And they've got some really tough fixtures coming up, Newcastle. So they've now got Chelsea, then they've got Arsenal, and then they have, I want to say, where is it? They've got Chelsea. They've got Chelsea twice. They've got them in the League Cup as well. Then they've got Arsenal, and then they've got Forest away. So not the easiest fixtures coming up for Newcastle. So they need to get a win, and quick. And then finally, Everton 2, Ipswich 0. Michael Keane turned into Johan Cruyff for his goal in the 40th minute. Absolutely unbelievable goal. And all I've seen on Twitter this week is Everton fans absolutely in love with Iliman Ndiaye.
Yes,
it feels like he's really getting to grips at Everton and he's going to be their exciting player this season. Huge win for them, really, when you think about it, because that was a kind of bottom of the table battle. It now puts them 4 points ahead of Ipswich. So huge win for Everton there, right?
Yeah, huge win. Hugely important given the circumstances. And also, I think maybe a bit of concern around Ipswich in terms of the style of football. They obviously produce really kind of stylistic style of football, less pragmatic. I think they need to grind some results, a bit like Gary O'Neill and Wolves. So it'll be interesting times there. But yeah, they seem to still have some good players. Just maybe defensively, Rory, they need to work on being a bit more solid at the back, because they're letting in goals now for fun, it seems.
Well, that was your Premier League weekend since, as we've been recording, Nottingham Forest just beat Crystal Palace 1-0. From what I saw, Dean Henderson dropped an absolute stinker, and Crystal Palace still look for their first win of the season as Chris Wood gets his 5th goal of the season. I've got him in my fantasy. I'm delighted. He's doing very, very well. Nice. Guys, that is all the Premier League action. We're going to take a very quick break before we come back and tell you about all the European action. We'll see you on the other side. And we are back. It's time for the European football this week, and there are some massive ties. Let's start with Arsenal taking on Shakhtar Donetsk today as you are listening. That's the big one. We have Aston Villa hosting Bologna in what I think will be a very intriguing tie. Bologna not having a great season. Aston Villa got an incredible start to their European campaign. Yeah. They'll be looking to get another 3 points here. Atalanta are hosting Celtic. If we go slightly north of the border, no, they're not English, but I'm not going to describe him as British either. I don't want bullets in the post. RB Leipzig will be hosting Liverpool. I'm going to move on. And Man City will be hosting Sparta Prague. I've got a Celtic shirt. I'm half Irish. I shouldn't be making that mistake. Let's go to the Europa League. And we have, in the Europa League, I've completely lost it. We have Manchester United going to Fenerbahce. It's the big one, guys. Mourinho hosting Ten Hag. I can't wait for the mind games that we're going to see all over the press tomorrow or today as you are listening. And we have a team that will be happy to be described as British, Rangers, hosting Steaua Bucharest. And then in the Europa League, finally, we have Chelsea going to Greece to play Panathinaikos. That'll be a spicy one. But the atmosphere there is going to be absolutely banging in it. But that is all of the European action this week. I think I got them all. Hearts are playing Ammonia. There we go.
Oh, well. We move into the Premier League fixtures then, Rory, and less spicy than that game you just described. We've got the East Midlands derby on Friday evening as at 8 p.m. UK time. Leicester City host Nottingham Forest, which could be an all-time classic given the Steve Cooper connections there. Anyway, we move into Saturday's game starting at 3 p.m. We've got Aston Villa at home to Bournemouth, Brentford at home to Ipswich Town, Brighton at home to Wolverhampton Wanderers, and Man City at home to Southampton before we see the 5:30 p.m. kickoff time where Everton host Fulham. And then we move into Sunday's fixtures, which is a packed lineup. So we'll start off at 2 p.m. where we have got Chelsea at home to Newcastle United, Crystal Palace at home to Tottenham Hotspur, and West Ham at home to Man United before at 4:30 your beloved Arsenal, Rory, host Liverpool. And that is your game week 9 fixtures.
Well, we can't go anywhere before we just very quickly talk about Liverpool taking on Arsenal. I think that's probably the game of the weekend. Adam, how do you see that one going? I think this is a big test for both sides, right? Liverpool been so tight defensively. Hopefully Arsenal can finish with 11 men. How do you see this one going?
That would be an achievement in itself, Rory. I think this will definitely be a good test for both coaches, both teams. It'll be fascinating. Personally, I think this looks like score draw written all over it. Personally, I think there will be goals in this. Be fascinating to see how they approach it. It'll be also interesting, Rory, from your point of view, whether we see Saka return to the fold. I'm sure there was a mindset that obviously resting for Bournemouth, then he'll be at least back for this game potentially. So hopefully, fingers crossed for you, Rory. But yeah, from a Liverpool perspective, they'll also want to ensure that they don't have any injuries midweek so they can go into this game with this same anticipation and potentially going out there to score goals. So let's see. But I'll be a bit wary of Salah at the moment. That's all I would say, Rory.
I don't want to see Saka anywhere near the starting lineup tonight. Shakhtar Donetsk. I want to see him at home with his feet up, relaxing because we need him for Sunday. Ødegaard, it's going to be too soon for him, I think. Yeah. So therefore, we definitely need Saka because we could see how much we missed him. I'm going to say we still do well in this game. I think Bournemouth was a blip. This team learned lessons quickly. I think at home we're very strong, so we should be okay. But I think it'll be a good game. Last time it was a really good game. I think it was a bit end-to-end and kind of nice to watch. So hopefully my nerves won't be too shredded. I will be watching it with the Arsenal Milan Football Supporters Club, I imagine. So a few pints would probably help. But guys, listener, that is everything. Adam, anything to say before I send the listener home so they can go and listen to our Serie A episode?
No, just make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms. And if you could do us a favor and give this video a like and also subscribe to our channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Love it. For said social media channels, you can find us on Twitter or X at Italian Anglo Pod. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Anglo-Italian Pod. I nearly forgot the name of the social media platforms then. And yeah, if you're listening audially, go onto your podcast app, give us a follow, give us a rating, and call me a knob. And we will forever be on your deck. Guys, enjoy your week. Enjoy the European football. We will see you next time.